Hey guys, guess who finally decided to make a tutorial? Over the last couple of years I've had so many people ask me how I do my Homestuck animations, and I figure it's time I did something slightly more informative than just list the programs I use. And there's already a billion tutorials out there about Photoshop and Flash, so this is really just going to be a demonstration of how I use them to make the animations. So a lot of the times when I make GIFs like these, it's not because I've thought, oh, I want to make this character do this. It's because I've seen a page and I think, Terezi looks like a headbanger here, so I'm going to make her do a headbang. And this page is a good starting point because her legs are the right distance apart, and if you bring it into Photoshop, the edges are mostly clean. But unfortunately, her head and her arms, horn as well, they've been rotated from a different frame, so they're all anti-aliased and kind of poopy looking. So what I normally do is I go back through some pages to find one that looks a bit smoother. This one looks like the original frame that was drawn, so save that. Bring that in. Boom. Now if you compare the two, you can see that on this one the edges are much cleaner and crisper compared to this one, where it's obviously just been rotated and Photoshop's tried to adapt as best it can. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to chop this thing up into pieces and overlay it on the bits on this thing which I don't really like. So now, using bits and pieces from both of those other panels, I've made this. Now what I've done here is I've cut it up so that every single individual piece that I want to move is on its own layer. So it looks like this. Got your feet, got the legs, body, one arm, other arm, and a head. And you can kind of notice with the body and the legs, there's a bit that actually overlaps around here-ish, and you're going to have to put that on basically anything you animate so that when you do actually rotate things away from each other, they're not just blatantly cut up into two separate pieces. Now I just take every single layer and save them all as individual transparent PNGs. Now that that's done, it's time to import everything into Flash and start actually animating it. So I just pick them all, drag and drop. Wait 100 years. And there we go. So now that I've got everything imported, I just put them all on their own layers by selecting all of them, going distribute to layers. That way I can keep track of each individual bit. Then I just drag the layers around so that the right stuff is on top of the right stuff. And the reason I didn't actually crop any of the pictures so that they're much smaller is so that when I bring everything in, they're all automatically in the right spot relative to everything else. So now that I've got everything in place and on its own layer, I want to be able to select stuff that's underneath other things, because at the moment, since all the images are the same size, if I click like her head, I'll get her arm because her arm's on top and the arm's just this gigantic transparent thing. But since all the placement's right, now what I do is I convert each bit to a graphic and go inside and put a mask over whatever's actually in there. And now I can pick stuff underneath it, and I just repeat that for everything else. Okay, I've done that, and now if I select all of them, you can see that they're very clear individual bits, and I can pull them apart without selecting the wrong thing. So now we're nearly ready to animate, but the last thing we got to do is move the pivot points so that things rotate in the spot that I want them to rotate. So for example, the feet are actually going to be locked because I don't want her feet to move at all. But her head I want to rotate. So what I do is I move it to just under her chin or where her neck is. Grab the arm, up to the shoulder. Body to go there because I want it to bend forward and back. Same thing for the other arm. Legs, let's put it on the ankles, just in case I wanted to bob up and down or anything like that. I'm gonna fast forward this bit because there's a ton of animation tutorials out there already, but after I'm done, I'm just gonna go through and give some pointers about what I've actually done that might not be immediately obvious. Okay, so now I have this. Brutal. So a couple of things that will only make sense if you know how to use Flash, again, go learn, is every single one of these things is a graphic, not a movie clip, because if it's a movie clip it won't play in a GIF. It'll just export a bunch of static things, because movie clips only work in Flash files. So what you want to do is you have them all as graphics and it just runs through every single animation in there. Another thing is I always, on basically everything in here, is I edit the easing, which means it starts off slow, speeds up, and slows down again, so it's nice and smooth the whole way through. And then inside here, there's another animation of her just rocking back and forth. I moved the head forward slightly so that it starts a little bit later and the arm starts a little bit later, and it just gives the whole thing a slightly less robotic feel because everything's going at different times if you look. So now I've just converted the entire thing into one more graphic because I'm finished with all the animation and now I'm going to set it up so that it works on Tumblr. So first thing you're going to do is change it so it's 500 pixels wide. Height, I'm not sure how much that matters. And then scale it up or down, whichever way you want. I'm gonna go up, just to be obnoxious. And then just run through it a couple of times and make sure that no matter what the animation does, it stays on the stage, so within that white border there. So once you put it to the size you like, you're going to want to export the whole thing as a series of PNGs, because that way we're going to bring it into Photoshop to make the final GIF, because while Flash can do GIFs, they look fucking disgusting. Now when you're exporting them, just to make it have that kind of pixel feel that Homestuck has, always untick smooth. And then to make sure it's transparent, you select 32-bit and go. And this final part, we've got all these individual frames, which we've got to turn into one GIF. Now what you could do is you could open up a new Photoshop thing and then drag them in one by one. And then cry yourself to sleep. But one thing I use that saved my life basically is use Adobe Bridge, because it has a function where you select everything you need. Your tools, Photoshop, load files into Photoshop layers, and it does the entire thing for you and puts them exactly where you want them. So just go have some alcohol or food or whatever, wait for that to finish. Okay, now that Bridge is finished doing its shit, you go create frame animation in the timeline panel thing. There's a really tiny spot here. You click that and you go make frames from layers, and it'll convert every single one of them to a frame. And then select the whole lot. And you want to set the delay to 0.02 or 3 seconds. Gives it that nice and smooth look. And then set it to forever, so it loops forever. And one thing you might have to do is actually click it again and hit reverse frames, because for some reason when it brings it in, it has a tendency to bring them backwards. So before you export it, play it out to check it's going in the right direction. Looks all good. And save it as a transparent GIF. Yeah, looks all good. And there you go, that's how I make my shit. Sorry if this wasn't all that informative, but yeah, like I said, dickloads of tutorials you can go through to work out exactly what happens there, but if you got any super specific questions, then feel free to bombard my inbox. Laters.